Imagine walking home alone at night and spotting a clown standing perfectly still under a flickering streetlight, staring directly at you. No movement, no sound, just an unsettling gaze locked onto you. Now imagine realizing that he's not alone. Then without warning, he starts running toward you at full speed. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving into 3 terrifying true clown encounters that went horribly wrong. These aren't just pranks. These are real stories of fear, danger, and the unknown. Let's get into it. Story 1, The Backyard Clown by Evan Caldwell. When I was 16, my parents went out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of my 10-year-old sister, Chloe. We lived in a quiet, suburban neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids rode their bikes until dark. But after that night, I never felt safe there again. It started just after midnight. I was in my room playing video games when I heard a faint tap, tap, tap on the window. At first I ignored it, assuming it was just a tree branch scraping the glass. But then Chloe screamed from down the hall. I bolted to her room, my heart pounding. She was sitting up in bed, clutching her blanket, her face pale. She pointed a shaking finger toward her window. I followed her gaze, and my stomach dropped. Standing just outside, barely illuminated by the dim backyard light, was a clown. He was tall and thin, his baggy costume sagging around his bony frame. The fabric was dirty and torn, like he had been wearing it for years without ever washing it. His face was painted white, but the makeup was cracked, revealing patches of pale, wrinkled skin beneath. His lips were painted into an exaggerated grin, but his eyes weren't smiling at all. Then he waved at us. I yanked Chloe away from the window and slammed the blind shut. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone to call 911. But before I could dial, I heard it. The back door handle rattled. My blood turned to ice. The clown had been outside Chloe's window just seconds ago. How was he already at the back door? I grabbed a kitchen knife and whispered to Chloe to stay behind me. My phone was still clutched in my other hand, my thumb hovering over the call button. The rattling stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate knocking. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Then, silence. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. I slowly crept toward the door, knife in hand. When I peeked through the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. The clown was gone. But as I turned away, a shadow darted past the kitchen window. My stomach lurched. He wasn't gone. He was circling the house. I grabbed Chloe's hand and pulled her toward the bathroom, locking us inside. My fingers trembled as I called 911, whispering frantically to the dispatcher. She told me to stay put and that officers were on their way. Minutes felt like hours. Then just outside the bathroom door, I heard it, a deep, wheezing breath. Chloe squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. The breathing was slow, deliberate, almost like he was listening to us too. Then suddenly, bang! The front door slammed open. Heavy boots pounded through the house. I barely had time to react before a voice called out, "Police!" I threw the door open, relief washing over me. 2 officers stood in the hallway, guns drawn. But the moment I saw their faces, my relief turned to confusion. They looked disturbed. "We saw him," one officer muttered. "He was standing in the front yard when we pulled up. Just standing there." I swallowed hard. "Where is he now?" The second officer shook his head. "He ran into the woods. We chased him, but he was fast." The officers checked the house and found something that still haunts me to this day. In the backyard, leading to every single window, were footprints, but not just a single set, multiple, some overlapping, as if he had been pacing around the house for hours watching us. We never found out who he was or what he wanted, but for years after that night, whenever I heard a faint tapping at my window, my mind would always go back to the clown, and I'd wonder, what if he had gotten inside? Story 2, The Birthday Party Nightmare by Daniel Mercer. I used to work as a party entertainer in college, mostly dressing up as superheroes or magicians for kids' birthdays. Sometimes I had to play a clown, which I hated. The costume was uncomfortable, the makeup itched, and clowns always gave me the creeps. But the pay was good, so I dealt with it. One weekend, I was booked for a private birthday party in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The mother, Mrs. Holloway, had contacted me a week before, saying it was for her son, Jason, who was turning 7. She sounded nervous over the phone, speaking in a rushed tone, but I figured she was just a stressed parent. I arrived at the house around 5 p.m., and something felt off immediately. There were no balloons, no decorations, and no sounds of kids playing. It didn't feel like a party at all. When I knocked, Mrs. Holloway answered almost instantly, as if she had been waiting by the door. She looked pale, her hands fidgeting, and after a quick glance behind me, she ushered me inside. She locked the door fast, her movements stiff. She led me to the living room, where Jason was sitting alone on the couch. He wasn't excited. He wasn't smiling. He just sat there staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. His hands were clenched in his lap so tightly that his knuckles were white. The silence in the house felt unnatural. No family members, no friends, just Jason and his mother. Trying to lighten the mood, I got into character, twisting balloon animals and doing goofy tricks. But Jason never laughed. His expression never changed. His mother just stood in the corner, watching nervously. Then, in a barely audible whisper, Jason said, "He doesn't like you." I froze. My forced smile faded. "Who doesn't like me, buddy?" Jason didn't speak. He just slowly raised a small hand and pointed toward the dark hallway behind me. A chill ran down my spine. I turned just enough to glance over my shoulder, and my stomach dropped. A clown. But it wasn't like me. It wasn't a costume. It was wrong. It stood at the edge of the hallway, its oversized costume sagging like loose skin. The paint on its face was cracked, its red grin stretched too high, and its eyes were black pits staring straight at me. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe Jason's father in a costume, but Mrs. Holloway's terrified expression told me otherwise. I took a shaky step back. Who is that?" I whispered. Mrs. Holloway didn't answer right away. Then in a strained voice, she said, "Jason's friend." Jason giggled softly, a quiet, knowing sound. "He doesn't like you," he said again. "You should leave." Then the clown moved. It didn't walk. It didn't step. 1 second it was in the hallway. The next it was closer. The light flickered. It was closer again. My chest tightened. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I bolted. I didn't grab my bag, didn't say a word. I just ran for the front door. Mrs. Holloway didn't try to stop me. I heard the door slam shut behind me as I sprinted to my car, my hands shaking so badly that I struggled with my keys. I finally started the engine and looked back at the house. The front door was wide open. Jason stood there, watching me with a small, eerie smile. But Mrs. Holloway was gone, and just behind Jason, a tall, grinning figure rested a long, pale hand on his shoulder. Its head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging me, before the door slowly swung shut. Story 3. The Carnival Stalker by Patrick Ellison. When I was 17, I worked at a local carnival that came to town every summer. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and I got to hang out with my friends. My job was simple: run the ring toss game, hand out prizes, and deal with the occasional angry parent claiming the game was rigged. I'd done it for 2 years without any issues. But during my 3rd summer there, something happened that still haunts me. That year, the carnival had hired a new clown. His name tag said Bobo, but I never learned his real name. He was tall, way too tall for a clown, almost unnaturally lanky. His face paint was sloppy, like it had been done in a hurry, and his costume was faded, stained with something I told myself was just dirt. But the worst part was his smile. It stretched across his face in a way that made my stomach churn, like he was always in on some sick joke no one else knew. From the moment he arrived, I felt uneasy around him. He wouldn't talk to the other workers, wouldn't take off his mask, and had this habit of staring at people for just a second too long. He didn't perform or tell jokes, he just wandered. One night, toward the end of my shift, I noticed him standing near my booth. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. At first, I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to some weird carnival act. But then, As the night stretched on, he didn't move. Every time I looked up, he was there, a little closer. Around 11 p.m., as the carnival was winding down, I started cleaning up my booth. When I looked up again, Bobo was gone. I exhaled in relief, telling myself I had imagined things. But when I turned to grab a trash bag from the storage shed behind my booth, I froze. Bobo was standing right there, less than 5 feet away. Up close, his costume smelled awful, like mildew and something rotten. His painted smile looked more smeared now, as if he had licked his lips and spread the red paint across his cheeks. Neither of us spoke. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Then in a low, raspy whisper, he said, "Want to see a magic trick?" I took a step back, gripping the wooden counter of my booth. "No, man, I'm good." I tried to keep my voice casual, but my throat was dry. Bobo grinned wider, his head tilted to the side, and for a second, I swore his neck bent at an unnatural angle. He reached into his oversized pocket, pulling out something small and dark. My stomach dropped when I saw what it was. A finger. A real, severed finger. He held it up between two gloved fingers, the nail still dirty, a thin line of dried blood crusted around the base. I bolted. I didn't look back, didn't care if I was overreacting. I ran straight to my manager's tent, barely able to breathe as I explained what had happened. The police were called, and when they searched the carnival, Bobo was nowhere to be found. His trailer was empty, no belongings, no ID. Just his clown mask, left neatly in the center of his bunk. But the worst part? The police identified the finger. It belonged to a missing girl from a town 3 states away. And Bobo, he was never found. 2 weeks later, my phone rang in the middle of the night. No caller ID. When I answered, I heard it. A low, raspy whisper. "Want to see a magic trick?" Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.